I was about 10 years old when this happened, and until today, when the night closes and the house gets too quiet, I remember. Not like a distant memory, like it was yesterday. I was at my grandmother's house, the one we called Dona Rosa. She was a small woman with white hair, the kind who always had a candy in the pocket and a hug ready. Calm, smiling, the type of person who never let fear enter through the door. That is why what happened that night never left my head. It was a Saturday. I had stayed to sleep there, like I sometimes did on weekends. The night was normal. We had dinner together. She made rice with chicken, the same as always, with that smell of fried garlic that I loved. After that, she washed the dishes, humming softly, and I stayed watching television on the sofa with her dog, an old mixed breed called Bentu, leaning against my feet. Nothing different. But around 10 o'clock, she stopped in the middle of the living room. Stopped out of nowhere. She was going to get water in the kitchen and simply stopped, in the middle of the way, with the empty glass in her hand. I didn't even notice at first. I only noticed when Bento stopped breathing deeply, lifted his head, and stayed looking to the same direction as her. The dog did not growl, did not bark, just stayed still with the ears up, the snout pointed to the window. And that, in some way, was more frightening than any bark. She was looking through the living room window, the window that faced the street, that dirt street with a single yellow light post that kept flickering every time the wind hit stronger. I called her by name. She did not answer. I called again. Nothing. I went to her, pulled the sleeve of her coat carefully, and then she turned her face to me. And I swear to you, that was not my grandmother's face. It was her face, yes, the same brown eyes, the same rounded nose, but the expression was of another person. It was of someone who just understood something very bad. She spoke low, almost whispering. "Turn everything off. The lights, the television, everything, and do not make noise." I stood still. I did not understand. She repeated, this time with her hand on my shoulder, firm, "Go, now." I obeyed. I turned off the television, turned off the lights of the living room, the hallway, the kitchen. The house sank into total darkness. The only light left was that weak post outside, throwing an orange and trembling brightness through the gaps of the window. My grandmother pulled me by the arm to the central hallway of the house, far from any window. She also called Bento with a snap of fingers, a snap so light that I almost did not hear, and the dog came without making any sound, pressing against her leg. We stayed standing there, leaning on the wall, in the dark. I did not dare to ask what was happening. The way she was breathing told me that it was not time to ask anything. And then, the silence started to get strange. It was not the usual silence of the night. It was a deeper silence than that, as if the insects had stopped singing at the same time, as if even the wind had held its breath. I pressed my ear against the wall and stayed listening. Nothing, absolutely nothing, until I heard the steps. They were heavy steps, slow, on the dirt street outside. Steps that stopped, started again, stopped again, as if someone was walking without hurry, looking at the houses one by one. My grandmother squeezed my hand, hard. The steps stopped in front of our house. I held my breath. Bento did not make any sound, but I felt his body become stiff against my leg. For a time that felt like an eternity, there was no sound, no movement, only that horrible feeling that something outside knew that we were inside. And then, slowly, I heard it, the gate grill being touched, and then came a different sound, a light scratching on the iron,
like a nail passing slowly over the iron, going up, going down, repeating. It was not someone testing the gate. It was someone feeling it.
I was about to look through the hallway toward the window when my grandmother put her hand on my cheek and turned my face to her. She made the silence gesture with the finger on the lips. Her eyes said everything. Do not move. Do not look. Do not make sound. We stayed like that for a time that I cannot calculate. It could have been 5 minutes. It could have been 20. When you are truly afraid, time stops working correctly. And then the steps started again, even slower, and they moved away. They went away down the street until the sound disappeared completely. My grandmother waited a good time before anything. Slowly, she went to the window, looked to one side, looked to the other, stayed still for a few seconds with her eyes fixed on some point that I could not see. Then she went back to the hallway, took a rosary that was hanging on the wall, sat on the chair, and stayed in silence. I sat on the floor near her. Bento lay down between the two. The night passed like that. In the next morning, the sunlight changed everything. That nameless horror of the previous night seemed less real with the clear day entering through the windows. I had breakfast with her, and when I could not hold it anymore, I asked, "Grandma, what was that yesterday?" She placed the cup on the table slowly, looked at me for a moment as if weighing how much she would tell me. Then she spoke. She said that when she was younger, before I was born, something had happened in her street. A woman disappeared, and before disappearing, neighbors said they had seen a man walking at night, alone, stopping in front of houses, always late, always slow, always looking. She said there was a detail that the neighbors repeated in a low voice. He never stopped at dark houses, only at illuminated ones, only where there was sign of people. She said they never really knew what that man did there. They never proved anything. But the woman disappeared, and other small things, things that people did not like to talk about out loud, also happened at that time. A child who disappeared for 2 days and came back without being able to explain where it had been. A dog that appeared dead without any mark on the body.
"Did you recognize him yesterday?" I asked. She stayed silent for a moment. "I do not know if it was him," she said, "but the way of walking was the same." She said that she learned since that time that when you see someone like that walking at night in that way, you do not turn on lights, do not make noise, do not call attention, because there are people who walk at night looking for who is awake, looking for who is alone, looking for a lit window. I stayed looking at her without knowing what to answer. She then said something that stayed engraved in me forever. "Dark house, closed house. Who looks for bad things passes in front and does not stop." And it was with that sentence that I grew up. About 20 years later, I went back to that street. My grandmother's house was not hers anymore. It was abandoned, with the gate rusted and the tall grass taking over the yard. I stayed on the other side of the street for a few minutes, just looking, and then I noticed something that I had never noticed before. The gate. More specifically, its height. It was too high for someone to touch there comfortably, but on the top part of the iron there were marks. Thin marks, repeated, as if something had passed there several times, from top to bottom, slowly, in the same pattern. I stayed looking at that for too long, and then I noticed another thing. The marks were not only on the outside, there were some on the inside too. I think a lot about that when the night closes. I think about the small figure of my grandmother standing at the window, recognizing something that I was too young to understand. I think about the weight of that hand on my shoulder, the firm whisper,
the dog motionless leaning against my leg. She never told me the whole story because she did not want to scare me more than necessary. She did what she did, protected me as she could, and lived with that in silence for decades. And I keep thinking how many times in life someone older, someone who has already seen things that you have not seen, gave you a simple warning that you did not fully understand. A short sentence, a gesture, a different look. Sometimes wisdom does not come in a long explanation. It comes in a whisper in the dark hallway. Turn everything off and do not make noise, because sometimes it is not about not being seen, it is about not being chosen.